Let me just switch account here, back to here. And close that. And then I'm just fooling around here. Hey, how do I hear myself now? Do I hear my ah, not that. Oh, do I hear myself now? Hello? Hello? The hell is this? Okay, there we go. Okay. There'd be sound, thank you. Yeah, back in. Okay, so let's I have to scroll back up. We had technical difficulties here, ladies and gentlemen, who will be watching this. I will have happy to say that I actually got some more subscribers, so we can do the rock thing again. Let me just fill up my water bottle, my water glass here, and okay. The Spy Guide script from our friend Grok. Tense map graphic of the Iran escalation day 31, Trump's oil gambit, ground troop signals, and the Realist Playbook. Tense map opening shot. I wish I had this stuff. Tense map graphic. The Middle East with missile icons over Iran, Israel, Gulf states. Upbeat but serious spy thriller music fades in. One thing I got Grok to realize is I'm not selling anything. So other than my locals channel where I've set up, I've had it for years. If anyone wants to go back there and watch that, spy guy at locals.com. And if you, for some reason, want to give me money, I have like a $5 subscription there for anyone. And I'll do like one-on-ones with anyone who does that at least once a week. So, hey everyone, it's the Spy Guy. No gadgets, no sales pitch. I caught on to that. Just the raw intelligence on global power plays that actually matter. Welcome back to the channel where we cut through the noise and look at the world the way states really operate. Raw national interest, power balances, and survival. Today is Monday, March 30th, 2026, day 31 of the U.S.-Israel war on Iran. Here's something someone said. I heard someone say we should start calling it a special military operation just to put in the extra screw. But I do agree with that. So day 31 of the U.S.-Israeli special military operation on Iran. We got the clearest signal yet. President Trump just went public with fresh threats to obliterate Iran's electric plants, oil wells, and cargo island if the Strait of Hormuz doesn't reopen for business. Now that I've been arguing for at least a week now. I think he wants the straits closed so he can put pressure on Europe to make them get out of the Ukraine war. Do what I say. And also just shutting down all this London stuff, the so-called city of London. Why does Britain get to use why is it Royal Navy no longer exist? And yet Britain gets to have the entire insurance industry for itself when the United States is doing all the heavy lifting. At the same time, he's floating talks with what he calls a new and more reasonable regime and refusing to rule out putting American boots on the ground. Thousands more U.S. troops, including elements of the 82nd Airborne and Marines, are flowing into the region right now. And overnight, Iranian missiles slammed into Israel's biggest oil refinery in Haifa. Yes, so we've been talking about those airborne units. I believe they're in theater. The Ready Brigade should be able to get anywhere in 18 hours. So they should be in theater and prepping for whatever operation they might be doing. That's the headline. Now let's break it down from a straight foreign policy realist lens. No ideology, no regime change fairy tales, just interest and power. And of course, my specific take on things. Quick recap of the day's intel. Trump tells reporters in the Financial Times he sees great progress with Tehran, but warns that if the Hormuz blockade stays shut, the U.S. will hit energy targets it has purposely not yet touched, because we have to understand the IRGC gets a portion, it pays itself from the oil revenues that they have a concession on in Iran. That's how they get paid. And a lot of the guys at the bottom aren't getting paid right now. So that's also kind of the pressure on this. So if you guys want to deal with that, if Iran, you want to play ball, we can take out your energy infrastructure. So kind of a threat, but not necessarily that. He openly says his preference would be to take the oil and float seizing cargo island, Iran's main oil export terminal. Possibly that might be there for the Marines. There's another island my friend Alan was talking about. I don't remember what it's called, but it's basically where they're staging a lot of all the speedboats with all the mines are based out of. Pentagon sources confirm more than 3,000 troops arrived over the weekend. That's the Ready Brigade and their command elements. Plans for limited ground ops, special forces raids, not a full-style invasion are on the table. Perfectly unreasonable to think that. It would take a year to build up an army in theater to take on Iran in that way. And as we've done with previous shows with my friend Kelly, the United States doesn't have the shipping assets to do that anymore. Iran's response, parliamentary speaker accuses Washington of lying about diplomacy while prepping a ground assault. Tehran's already mobilized reserves and is firing back with missiles and drones. And we did see, everyone's making a big deal of that one plane that got hit. But guys, all these planes are going to the boneyard anyways. People don't realize that. We had that with my friend Richard, who was on last week, along with Kelly, and he was pointing out that these planes that, like the one that was just hit, were set for decommissioning. So, is it a big deal that they got hit? I guess so, but this plane was going away anyways. Over half, he used to maintain these vehicles. He knows for sure. He's like, half of the planes are gone already from that particular fleet. So it's not like it's the big a deal as people want to are trying to amplify it as. On the ground, combined Iranian Hezbollah strikes torch part of the Haifa refinery, Israel's largest oil hub. This isn't random chaos. This is classic great power coercion in action. Here's a realist read, cold and unemotional, with my unique spin. States don't act out of love or hate. They act out to maximize security and relative power. For the United States, the core interest here is simple: keep the Strait of Hormuz open. But it is an oil flowing at prices that don't wreck the global economy. As stated previously, I think he's using this as leverage on Europe, and he wants the straits closed. Iran has leverage because it can threaten the choke points with missiles and mines. By hitting Iranian energy and infrastructure and signaling possible ground seizure of Karg Island, Washington is using its massive conventional superiority to strip away that leverage. Trump's talk of the new regional regime is realist signaling too. Whether Khamenei's death last month, or did he die, actually produced a power shift, or whether it's just pressure-induced pragmatism in Tehran, doesn't matter. What matters is the perception that Iranian decision-makers believe continued resist and risk total collapse of their oil revenue and export capacity. They have a rational incentive to cut a deal that leaves the regime in place but neuters its ability to shut the Gulf. For Iran, the realist calculation is equally clear. The Islamic Republic isn't suicidal. It's a rational actor that survives sanctions, proxy wars, and now direct strikes for one reason. It's built an asymmetric toolkit. Missiles, drones, Hezbollah's, Houthis, precisely to their superior conventional powers. Closing Hormuz and hitting Haifa are not emotional outbursts. Their attempts to oppose costs high enough that Washington decides the price of total victory isn't worth it. We also got to remember, if we're going with the warlord theory, a lot of these guys are not actually acting on orders from the central government, but are trying to hit the targets that they know will make them look good on the next political stage of Iran's history, election cycle. I did the most stuff to these people versus you did the most amounts to these people. Realists have seen this movie before. 2003 looked easy on paper until the occupation turned into $1 trillion quagmire. Yeah, this was where this whole "we don't have a plan" myth comes from. We had 13 plans. I read Cobra 2. They had 13 plans. They couldn't decide on any of them. They scrapped all of them. Then they disbanded the Iraqi army in the most stupid way possible. And you ended up in this quagmire that went on for years. Would face a ground presence inside Iran, even limited, would face mountains, a population that hates foreign invaders. That may or may not be true, more than it hates its own government, speculation, and an endless supply of IRGC and proxy fighters. No, they don't. They only get they don't have an endless supply of IRGC and proxy fighters, because who was the proxy person who was the safe base for all the proxy forces? It was Iran. Who was funding all this stuff? Iran oil flows. So if they cut off the oil, though they do have the pipeline that's going to China, giving them some revenue, but if Iran doesn't get any revenue out of this, they can't afford to pay their own guys. And that's where a lot of this is coming from. So we have to remember that too. If you can't pay the troops, your soldiers to fight, what are you going to do? They'll fall apart on their own. The danger point isn't ideology; it's miscalculation. If Tehran thinks Trump is bluffing, it keeps the strait closed, and we get higher oil. Europe gets higher oil prices, more strikes, and a real risk of regional blowback. If Washington overplays the ground troop card, it hands Iran the greatest recruitment tool it's ever had. Power is about credibility. Both sides have to believe that other will follow through. Yes. So we just always have to remember there's financial aspects on this, not just raw geopolitics. Shouldn't actually make that part of it. I should definitely, next time I do have a Grok script go up one of these, I'll be sure to add in the financial part as well. Bottom line, from a realist perspective, this isn't about democracy in Iran or defeating radical Islam. It's about controlling the energy artery that supplies roughly 20% of the world's oil. The side that forces the other to blink first wins the round. Right now, Trump is using the classic realist toolkit, overwhelming force plus an off-ramp to make Tehran choose between survival and total and economic strangulation. Whether the deal lands in the next few days or we see actual U.S. troops on Karg Island or one of the other or many other targets will tell us if the coercion worked or if they were heading to a longer, bloodier test of wills. That's the unfiltered realist take, moral ground instead, just the power map as it actually exists. You want more straight intel without the spin? Hit subscribe, drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think Tehran's next move is? And I'll see you in the next brief. Stay sharp out there. This is the Spy Guy. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And also, is even suggesting my next video. Interesting what a U.S. Iran deal actually looks like. That's kind of nice. Also, check out my locals page, spyguy@locals.com. Now, I want to talk about something else that has completely gone under the radar in a lot of things. I was going to do my Promethean action video, but this is something that's kind of important that I don't sell gadgets, but this involves a gadget. Okay, here's a refresh rundown. On March 24th, 2026, NASA announced a new nuclear space mission to Mars. The Space Reactor 1 Freedom, SR1 Freedom, also tied to the Skyfall payload mission, which, by the way, a friend of mine has been working on for years. I did an interview a year ago with him. Check it out. He talks about it there if anyone's interested in it. It's my video with Paul O'Brien and C. Writer. Launch target or Mark Lardis. Launch target December 28, next Mars launch window. Roughly 1 year to reach Mars. This is NASA's first nuclear-powered interplanetary spacecraft, specifically using nuclear electric propulsion or a NERVA drive, not the nuclear thermal propulsion I was flirting earlier, now canceled Draco program. The spacecraft will carry a 20-kilowatt nuclear fission reactor using high-assay, low-enriched uranium. The reactor generates heat, converted into electricity, powers highly efficient ion thrusters, So, and this setup is extremely fuel efficient for deep space, allowing the craft to move more mass with far less propellant than chemical rockets. It's a technical demonstration that builds flight heritage for nuclear hardware in deep space, which could prove the pathway for faster, heavier cargo or crewed missions later. The payload will be 3 small helicopters, Skyfall class, inspired by the successful Ingenuity helicopter that flew with Perseverance. These autonomous rotors will scout Mars' surface, looking for water, ice, safe landing zone, interesting science sites, and helping plan future human missions. Think of this as them as agile aerial scouts that can cover more ground than rovers alone. Why this matters? Uh, from a straight power capability perspective, chemical rockets are limited by physics. Mars trips typically take 6 to 9 months with narrow launch windows. Nuclear electricity gives steady, efficient thrusts that can shorten effective timelines and carry more payload over long hauls. It tests in space nuclear operations, reactor startup, power management, radiation shielding, regulatory safety precedents without the higher risk of a high thrust nuclear thermal rocket right away. NASA's repurposing, reprioritizing some lunar gateway hardware for this, showing a pragmatic shift toward dual use tech for moon based power and Mars transport. Success would strengthen U.S. leadership in space nuclear tech and open the industrial base for bigger systems down the road. This is not a crewed mission and not the high thrust nuclear rocket that gets to Mars in weeks, months, sometimes hyped in videos. It's a small, low risk demo of nuclear electric propulsion for cargo science precursors. The earlier DARPA NASA Draco nuclear thermal demo was canceled in 2025 after cost benefit reassessment. That being said, the plan for this stuff could get once the infrastructure is in place, you could have reactors getting there in 45 days. We used to I remember reading a short novel as a kid by Arthur C. Clarke, and space travel to Mars was based on basically dropping atomic, like using an Orion drive to drop out a small tack nuke off the back end, and it got the ship there in roughly 100 days' time. And we could be possibly doing that from now. We could do that. There's all sorts of ways to get around that have been stopped and hampered since the 60s, since we left the gold standard and allowed for this to happen. Design work ramps up quickly in 2026. Hardware and spacecraft assembly targeted for 2028. Reactors plan to activate shortly after launch. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman phrases this is part of a broader push aligned with national space policy priorities, including lunar-based plans that also lean on nuclear surface power. I'm a big fan of an obscure science fiction show from the 80s called Star Cops. And they've been making new ones with some of the surviving cast. And it was actually made by I think Douglas Adams made it, or yeah, and it's a very great, smart British, TV show, but it shows a space that's much more developed and probably in the lines we're going to go. They have a Charles de Gaulle space station. They have the American space, Ronald Reagan space station, which is run just the way you would think it was run, and because it's noted because it has gravity, and most of the people are on. Most of the stuff operations happen on Moon with occasional trips to Earth for vacations and stuff and for investigations. But this is the kind of stuff that could get us there. First time a fission reactor powers an interplanetary journey. Failures or delays are always possible with new nuclear space tech. But the intent is clear. Prove the power source and propulsion for the long haul to Mars and beyond. I shall have to look into I'm going to definitely do more follow-up on this nuclear stuff because it is interesting to me as well. And I just think it kind of makes a break from all the geopolitical heavy stuff. Okay, so where to now? We'll figure it out where I did with the last. Go to my history, pull up. Come on, open. Open. Uh, and then finally, we'll finish off with my review of the latest Promethean action. Screen. So, here we go again.
Robert F.
Now it's
Kennedy
sound.
Jr. made one of the most remarkable statements of the past week at the CPAC conference.
I think Donald Trump understands the use of power better than probably any president that we've had, at least since Roosevelt and maybe in American history. I think my father and my uncle would support. I think that if they were around today, they would be making the same kind of choice that President Trump is about Iran, about Ukraine, about trying to raise up the middle class.
He also pointed out that he would.
I really appreciate Promethean Action. It's a place I can go to without all the doom pilling that a lot of the other people are, the Bannon wing, are spewing out there. It's just like, come on, guys. Talk about some of the good things for once. We got nuclear-powered space missions. Jesus.
Was raised in a Democratic Party that was very opposed to NAFTA. But the moment Trump came out against it, the Democrats flipped and supported free trade. Those two statements tell you more about what is really going on in the world than endless hours of media coverage or doom scrolling. The media is lost in the fog of war and politics. Take The Economist. They're telling you that Iran has the advantage and a month of bombing has accomplished nothing. Or the mainstream press, which is telling you that the No King's Day rallies featuring adults who dressed up as frogs and featuring drag queens represent the political mood of the nation.
Yeah, this idea that everyone's saying it's like this giant protest. I didn't see any protest. I mean, here in Canada, though, it's kind of ridiculous to have a No Kings protest in Canada. Like, I'm a monarchist. We're a monarchy. Take that. But we had seen all these pictures of Soviet guys wearing running around with flags of the Soviet Union. Maybe they're FBI agents trying to infiltrate and do what they did to the right, but or these Patriot Front guys or whatever the hell everyone thought they were feds, but maybe they are feds with their Soviet Union flags, but maybe they're just commies.
RFK's remarks cut through all of that. The binary choices of left versus right, war versus anti-war are being shattered as Donald Trump reasserts real American policies and liberates us from the strategic and economic straitjacket imposed since the end of World War II. These aren't new ideas. They are the oldest American ideas, suppressed and now coming back. I'm Susan Kokinda. I remember Kennedy's uncle and father. I was on the ground in California campaigning for Robert F. Kennedy Sr. when he was shot. And like his son, I've spent more than 5 decades fighting for the opportunity that Donald Trump has given us to bring those principles back to life. So if you have a sense that something very big is happening, that the world is being rearranged in ways the media can't explain, then hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons, stay in touch, and help us expand our reach. Here's what we're covering today. First, the Iran conflict and how it represents a complete break with 6 decades of imperial foreign policy. Second, the significance of J.D. Vance in the negotiations. And third, how Scott Bessent and Peter Navarro are defining the battle by name. That is, the American system versus the British system.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff here, I think, is like, I'm just not too sure how, like, 4D chess it is. Sometimes I feel it's just like, people are just in a milieu, and that's what the British imperial system is. It's just how they, like an ideology that makes people believe in this kind of system versus some of the other system versus the American system. So, anyways.
So let's start with who is no longer in the room and why that changes everything. This week, the Empire's own institutions confirmed it. Chatham House, the British foreign policy flagship think tank, published a piece with a headline that could have come from this channel. Britain's handling of the Iran war shows the limits of UK power. Chatham House also announced that the House of Lords International Relations and Defense Committee will come to Chatham House, where they will discuss the question of what they now call the not-so-special relationship and whether it can.
Yeah, well, what did you think was going to happen when you bring in millions of Muslims and let them infiltrate your intelligence agencies? Come on. You have now national political Islamist parties in your country, and they're deliberately telling people in Iran what's going on. Give me a break. This was nuts. You should never have brought in all these people, but you did. And then you're shocked when your entire plan of the global destabilization is coming back to bite you in the butt.
Can survive Trump 2.0. The empire is writing its own autopsy.
Also, don't think any future Democrat's going to be aligned with the British system as well. I think what's going on with Palestine and a lot of other things is going to make basically one of the reasons why Trump has to be the one to do this is because the mood in America has shifted so against Israel. They'd never get another chance to do this.
And the conservative treehouse gave it the headline it deserved. British Defense Minister outlines how the UK Navy will defend the West as soon as they locate their ships. With those tools of the Great Game sidelined, watch what is actually happening. Right now in Islamabad, the foreign ministers of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt are sitting together for the purpose of opening up a dialogue between the United States and Iran, not managing the conflict, ending it. Britain.
Yeah, and this is one of my points that I kind of bring up sometimes. We had after 9/11, people do not understand that Iran nearly went to war with Afghanistan in the 1990s, and at the start of after 9/11, they came through back channels to the United States and said, "Hey, we're willing to go to help you even with our neighbors, the Taliban. We're willing to help you out with that, including up to, if you want to, we could restore full diplomatic relations. Stop calling you guys the Great Satan. We'll be help if you want our help in Afghanistan. We'll do it." Instead, what happens? George W. Bush invades Iraq, and Iran gets basically fights the United States over it. The axis of evil, up until the failures to negotiate with the Russians, and that drove the Russians into the arms of the Chinese in 2022. I called that the biggest foreign policy stupidest decision of the 21st century. So it's now the second stupidest decision of the 21st century. And here's Trump trying to clean up the mess.
Is not in that room, neither is the EU or NATO. And when Pakistan's foreign minister announced that Iran had agreed to allow 20 more Pakistani flagged ships through the Strait of Hormuz, he addressed his statement on X directly to J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, and Steve Witkoff. Not London, not Brussels, to the Americans. And President Trump himself reposted it within hours. So you have a sovereign Islamic quartet with no colonial history in Iran, no Sykes-Picot baggage, and no 75 years of imperial management to answer for, trying to broker a sovereign resolution. That's a genuinely new thing, and it's happening because the old managers are no longer in the room. And it is important that you see that this is new. The dominant media narratives are written to keep you angry and impotent. Promethean action puts you on this new stage of history and gives you the in-depth analysis you need. So head on over to our website and sign up for our free newsletter. The link is in the description. Now, the empire being out of the room only matters if someone else is in it and acting like an American. And that's where Vice President J.D. Vance comes in. President Trump confirmed that Vice President Vance will be the lead negotiator for the U.S. And the well-sourced Barak Ravid at Axios gave that background. He says, Vance's seniority in the administration and his well-documented opposition to open-ended conflicts overseas, White House officials say, make him a more attractive interlocutor for the Iranians than Witkoff and Kushner. Partly for those reasons, Witkoff recommended Vance as lead negotiator.
And you see how this, and sometimes I think this is all 4D chess and stuff with that. So first off, Kushner and Witkoff would be terrible negotiators with Iran. You know, Israeli-aligned Jews. I'm pretty sure I would be surprised if both don't have their Israeli-backed passport and second citizenships. But also, Vance and Joe Kent coming out and saying Vance is against the war. Joe Kent coming out and basically setting up this narrative of this, and then Vance being publicly kept out of the decision-making chain supposedly because he's a peacenik. Now he's been insulated to be the one who gets to lead the negotiations to end the conflict. He gets to be the great peacemaker. He was what makes you don't think that was the plan all along?
And Axios quotes another senior administration advisor saying, if the Iranians can't strike a deal with Vance, they won't get a deal. And the article makes clear that Vance has directly challenged Netanyahu on Israel's overly optimistic assessment on regime change and on its endgame goals, both of which diverge from the administration's. The neoconservative model that ran American Middle East policy for 30 years never did that. American foreign policy was just a tool in the British toolkit alongside Israeli foreign policy and Muslim Brotherhood fostered extremism. The result?
All created by the British.
30 years of managed conflict and no resolution. Vance is doing something different, acting as an American official representing American interests, including our interests in not fighting a forever war. Now, Vance's role is public, but it does echo something older. It echoes the role that Robert F. Kennedy Sr. played in the Cuban Missile Crisis. JFK sent his brother, the Attorney General, to conduct secret back-channel discussions with the Soviets because he knew that RFK shared his agenda, the American agenda, and that the Soviets would understand that. This is what RFK Jr. is pointing at, not a specific tactic, but a disposition. And that disposition has largely been absent since FDR last exercised American power during World War II. The endgame of that war was to defeat fascism. But Roosevelt's stated intention, unfulfilled because he died before the war ended, was to free the world from British 18th century methods. Unfortunately, those methods remained intact.
And how did he just die? Coincident? His son, Roosevelt's son, I can't remember his name. I believe his nephew's Kermit. But anyways, wrote a book once in which he said FDR told Churchill that they were no longer going to be allowed to have the empire, and that they were going to do things the American way from going forward. And then suddenly he dies a few days later. I'm not saying Churchill hadn't killed. I don't think that, but Churchill definitely does have a reputation for being an imperialist. I think he's one of the better figures in the empire, trying to keep it like a good empire versus the bad figures. But I wouldn't be surprised, having been told that someone just had to slip a heart attack drug into FDR's thing. So as they say, the British always kill your presidents.
Until now, as managed conflicts kept especially the Mideast from economic development and peace. Now, the same break you're watching in Islamabad is happening simultaneously in trade and monetary policy. And this week, both Peter Navarro and Scott Bessent put a name to it. In a Politico interview, presidential trade advisor Navarro made clear that this administration is carrying out a revolution.
Our trade policy is fundamentally revamping the entire world order, in the language of the other side. Donald Trump, going back in history, channeling Alexander Hamilton, channeling McKinley, channeling Henry Clay, is basically adopting an America First policy where the protection against unfair trade makes us stronger.
So Navarro joins Trade Ambassador Jameson Greer, Treasury Secretary Bessent, and Vice President Vance in affirming that this administration's policy is that of the champions of the American system.
Yep. One of the things that really woke me up since COVID has been the fact that there's much more to this world than what we let on, and a lot of it is in the financial thing. That's why I'm so grateful for encountering Tom Luongo, is because I'm like, oh my God, it's my dad. He sounds just like my father.
And Navarro then made clear who represents the old order. He was asked about Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England and now Canadian Prime Minister, who is currently organizing a WTO coalition to try and check Americans' trade policy. Navarro was direct. He said, "It's typical Carney behavior. We've got a problem in Great Britain and Canada with liberal Trump haters." Now, let's look at Carney's former employer, the Bank of England.
Yeah, we definitely have to look at the fact that under his watch, the British economy went to crap, and under his watch, Canada's economy is going to crap. So I should say that. Partly going to crap, but my premier, Doug Ford, is doing something about it. So it's just like, screw it. We're bypassing Quebec. We're going to build a thing in James Bay, and we're going to ship north a pipeline around Quebec. Okay, let's do this.
Which was suddenly in the news this week in a story that was overshadowed by Iran coverage and the government shutdown. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent went to war with the Financial Times, the mouthpiece of the City of London, on the issue of the Bank of England. The FT published a story claiming Bessent had praised the Bank of England as a model for restructuring the Federal Reserve. And before they published it, Bessent had given them an on-the-record denial, and they ran it anyway on anonymous sources.
Wow. This is a classic line by our friend, the Big Gay Patent.
So Bessent shot back with vehemence. By publishing this explicitly false story, the FT has officially become tabloid trash for market participants. In short, FT has literally manufactured an entirely fake policy position for me and the administration. And here's the punchline. He went on to say, "There is much to be said about the storied Bank of England, but any recreation of its operating framework on this side of the Atlantic has never been contemplated. The shameful journalists and editors at the FT are shocking in their meretriciousness, lack of standards, and general intellectual libertinism. It is the worst tradition of Fleet Street to manufacture news rather than report it." So what's really going
Meretriciousness. Try saying that word 5 times fast. I don't even think I've even heard of it before.
on here? The Bank of England model is the City of London's preferred architecture for central banking. Bessent is rejecting that. He wants to narrow the Fed's mandate and return to financial instruments and credit instruments that will serve productive economic activity. When the FT tried to claim his reform agenda for their framework, he smacked it down with force. The American system revival that Navarro is pursuing in trade, that Bessent is pursuing in monetary policy, that Vance is expressing in foreign policy, it's all one thing. So whether it's the FT or Carney's rules-based order or the Chatham House autopsy, it's the same old imperial order responding to Trump's new American agenda. Which takes us back to where we started. RFK Jr at CPAC saying his father and uncle would support what Trump is doing in Iran and in...
By the way, with everything going on, I didn't even know CPAC happened on the weekend. Okay, like this is pretty grim. Wow, okay, that happened.
...the economy. What Kennedy is saying is that there is an older tradition that defines what American power is actually for. Not managing conflict for imperial financial interests, not free trade frameworks that drain American manufacturing, not central banking architectures designed in the City of London, but policies that support sovereign national development, productive economy, and policies that are actually for peace built through construction. Hamilton named it, FDR reasserted it, JFK tried to revive it, and Trump is the first president since then to bring it back to life. That is what is invisible inside the binary choices that the old order provides you. pro-war or anti-war, free trade or socialism, Fed tightening or loosening. Every one of those binaries is a cage, designed to make the American system unspeakable. Well, Promethean action speaks the American system loud and clear. And once you see the tradition, the shape of what is happening becomes obvious. And that clarity is exactly what this channel exists to provide. So help us speak it louder and support us by going over to the Promethean Action website and becoming a paying member or contributor. This has been your Monday Brief. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, and agents, I want to thank you for tuning in as well. Thank you, JP, for letting me know about the sound quality on the last episode. I private it, so it shouldn't be seen anymore by anyone. But I want to thank you for helping me out with that. And yeah, I'm going to have a kind of a quick day today. Normally I go an hour and a half or so, but I just haven't really. Either the videos that I would like to review are like an hour and a half long, or they're kind of weird and obscure. So I haven't had a really good chance to do it. So I just thought I'd do the Promethean Action, do the daily brief, and talk about the NASA thing. And I think I'll be, as Grok suggests, there's more to be discussed about the NASA thing. So I might make that as part of the show going forward and start trying to make this less just of me wishing I was in on the conversation and more doing that. But I also, I've been bringing on people onto this platform who are willing to help out and get us informed on things that are going on. So even though this show is a little short, like Friday night's stream with Warhound, but he was in a lot of pain, guys. He's got himself a new job where he loves it, but he's just not used to using those muscles anymore doing landscaping work. Anyways, I want to thank you for stopping by. I got to get going. Remember, if you like this, like, share, subscribe. Check out Locals and get involved there on the spy guy at locals.com. And basically, what I want to be before signing off, yeah, there's just we need more. I got up to 525 subscribers. So this channel, yeah, it is good. So I will definitely keep that going. And signing off. See you guys in the future.